My name is Yvonne Wolf. I am a cultural consultant, and I'm here with my pleasure to introduce you to a piece of my life back in Denmark, and celebrating Chinese New Year in Copenhagen 1995. I invite you to join me, take you back in time almost 30 years ago when I first arrived in Denmark and my experiences there as a Chinese American. When you think about Chinese in Copenhagen, is this what you think of? Maybe that part of Chinese in the Tivoli Garden is probably what the image that came to your mind. Most people didn't even think about Chinese immigration in Denmark. It's such a foreign and unusual topic. So here today, it's my pleasure to present to you my experience in the 1990s when I arrived initially as a exchange student from University of California. So University of California's school system offered this opportunity that I was so glad that I could be part of back in 1992. And that time I was among a dozen of Californian students coming to Copenhagen, coming to the first time ever in a cold country. And this is the kind of experiences we had. Now, for me, it was special because only another student and myself were of Chinese descent. So today, my short topic with you today is about the Chinese immigration in Denmark, a little background on that, and about the Chinese New Year in Copenhagen, a very special Chinese New Year in Copenhagen in 1995, and then visit about from my parents at that time. So let's go back to the 1990s. In 1992, I arrived in Denmark, in Copenhagen, the very first time ever been outside of Taiwan, where I was born and grew up, and then lived in most of my life in Los Angeles. And then here I was in Denmark, where I probably the first country I ever experienced 4 seasons. So then February of 1995 was the Chinese New Year that I will show you some pictures of some very fantastic way we celebrated. In May of 1995, my parents visited me the first time in Copenhagen. In November 1995, I was one of the the crowd and waiting for Prince Joachim and Princess Alexandra's royal wedding in the procession. That was so beautiful. And then in December 1997, I departed from Denmark and returned to Los Angeles and continued my life there. 1992 was a very exciting year. I had no idea that it was the Queen Margaret II's 25th wedding anniversary. And what an incredible celebration all around Copenhagen. We saw crowns like this decorated by artists, and it was so exciting and so very festive that I felt like this was something new. This was not in the United States anymore. So as I prepare for this program to introduce you a little piece of my life as a Chinese American in Denmark, I realized I really should look into that the statistics and what I was really part of. So in looking into that, I looked into a Meta News study on the Chinese in Denmark. So in the 1990s, the Chinese immigrated, mainly arrived on a work visa from the 1960s and 70s, where there's a shortage of labor in Denmark. So they mostly worked in the food industry and they were restaurant owners. And the population was really rather small. It was 3,300 about there of Chinese descent, people of Chinese descent living in Denmark. And they had a tiny Chinatown. Now, coming from Los Angeles, this was the smallest Chinese population I probably never ever experienced. 3,300, I think the University of California, Irvine, the Chinese population there was greater than 3,300. And we didn't even know each other that well when I went to University of California, Irvine, because we were so familiar with such a great number of Chinese immigrants that it was not this intimate relationship. People just almost have that urban experience of people not knowing each other. But here I arrived in Copenhagen, where the Chinese population was very small, not just small in numbers, but intimate. They knew each other. They went to school with each other. They worked together. They knew each other from years, and they were just had a very good relationship with everyone. I was very much welcomed into this environment, and I was, I guess, surprised and felt the warmth of the Chinese population in Copenhagen. Now, this Chinese population isn't what you might think, like from China necessarily, or strictly from Taiwan, or from Hong Kong. It was a very loosely defined Chinese because people there mostly, yes, mostly came from Taiwan, but that time there were also Chinese from Malaysia, let's say Chinese from Thailand, and they identified themselves as this Chinese, broader sense of Chinese in Copenhagen. And if you didn't know where this Chinatown was, this is where it was, behind the main central train station, or Copenhagen train station, called Copenhagen. And in the back of this, there was a few streets, and I can show you in the drawing, even though this picture might not be very clear, but this is Fu Hao restaurant, and a couple streets here, Isagel, and this is where, with Hamtol, this is where the Chinese population would be. And it's just a few stores. Again, this Chinatown was nothing like I have experienced before, because this was only maybe 5 stores, a couple of restaurants, but then the other phenomenon that was more common is what I would tell you about later, is the Chinese grills. As Meta Thornew study showed in the Chinese in Denmark, most of the Chinese population were in Copenhagen. Outside of Copenhagen, there's very few Chinese to even talk about as over the 1990s. So at that time, they engaged in mostly the food business. So most of the people I knew, my age group at that time as a university student, were children of business owners, of diner owners and restaurant owners. And these Chinese grills, as you see in these pictures, are very common sight. These Chinese grills sold hamburgers as well as spring rolls. So it was very common to have your fried rice along with a beer with some kind of a Danish meal as well. So I just covered a little bit about what the Chinese population was like in Copenhagen at that time. And then we have this Chinese New Year. And previous to this 1995, between 1992 to 1995, I really didn't have any real Chinese New Year experience. The reason is because, well, when you don't have the right foods, you don't have family, it's really hard to have a festival that makes you feel like home. But of course, I wasn't the only one who felt this way. There were so many, the Chinese population also had pain of homesickness, that the best thing to do was to throw a party together. Now at that time, 1994, in May, the Taipei representative, and his name was Mr. Yu Chen, he was assigned to Copenhagen. Now, this is a picture where I will have show you that Mr. Yu Chen and his wife arrived from Taiwan. Now, he was a career diplomat, and this was his final assignment before retirement. When he arrived in Copenhagen, this was a different place for him as well. Now, Taiwan did not have any kind of a formal diplomatic relationship with Denmark, and this is true for many reasons, but mostly because of its lack of a sovereignty status through the UN. So the Taipei office was an office that encouraged economic development and cultural exchange, and the representative, instead of an ambassador, would have that same position without the official title. When he arrived in Copenhagen, he met with the Chinese population, and he thought, wow, it would be so nice to throw a proper Chinese New Year festival for these people of Chinese descent. So this was 1994 in May he arrived. So the following year, where the new year would be 1995. He prepared to bring something special to the Chinese population there. So he ordered these costumes, the Chinese historical costumes, in a way to connect the people with its rich cultural history. Now the costumes were ordered before volunteers were invited to wear them, and myself and other Chinese descent or young people of Chinese descent were invited to try them on. Whoever fit the costume get to wear it, and we had this fashion show as part of the Chinese New Year festival. It was not common, but this was a very special event. And here I was in a Qing dynasty costume of the 18th century. I was portraying Imperial Consort Pearl. And she, in the best sense, is equivalent to a Chinese princess. And there were other people who participated in this, and they became my best friends in Copenhagen. So these historical figures was as a magistrate and as an emperor and as a warrior. Now the men costumes weren't nearly as interesting, of course, as the women costumes. So I would like to show you the ladies. So the women that were depicted in historical figures were princesses of 4 time periods. Now this is probably the shortest way I can explain it to you, because each one of them had a particular life and depicted a real person of that time. Just as my character of the Princess Pearl, this character was Xi Shi, who was known to weave silk, and this one with a golden headdress was Yang Guifei, and this one with a pink headdress was Xiao Feiyan, who was a princess also at that time. And all of us together was part of this fashion show, but also brought the festivity to a very special level. All of us have this wonderful memory from this festival that we probably never ever had to its like sense. So here are the 4 princesses with the emperor and a magistrate and a warrior. Now, having had that wonderful Chinese New Year experience, that year, May, my parents came to visit me, and they came from America, Los Angeles, where they have worked very much as well as a small business owner, and they were able to come from Los Angeles, and that time it was also very special for me, knowing that as small business owners, my parents never really had weekends or a week off on vacation until they came to see me. So they were off for 2 weeks, and that was probably the longest time they've ever had time off since they started their small business in 1980, coming to America. So this Danish lifestyle at that time for them was a luxury that everybody had at least. Even then, at least 3 or 4 weeks of vacation a year. My parents actually got, let's say, a little, let's say, bored with so much time off. They were very unfamiliar with this, but they did enjoy all the sightseeing they were able to do. So let me show you some places they went in Copenhagen. My parents visited us in Copenhagen. In that time, my husband, my Danish husband Kim, and I lived in this apartment that was in the what they call the attic apartments. They were just newly renovated at that time to have the new windows and heating. So this apartment was at its best condition ever at that point. My mother actually was reminded of her home in China. Now, I was just as surprised that my mother grew up in a German or European style building when she grew up in China. And that is because she grew up in Qingdao, which was a German territory in the late 19th century, and that was why she was familiar with this house. She was absolutely tickled to return to such a building that brought back so many memories of her childhood. So here are some places we went. You see, my parents are in coats, and they were very surprised because they have never been anywhere so cold for May. So at that point, it was very different for them because they came from Taiwan and then to Los Angeles, and they had similar experience as I did of this was a cold spring. And here they are at Kronborg and front of the Little Mermaid. So then we visited Northern Jutland, Scorpion, where my in-laws lived. And this is the station from Scorpion train station. My in-laws were very kind to give my parents the warmest welcome when we traveled to Northern Jutland. So here is my in-laws, and my then husband, Kim Anderson, Ruth and Hardy Anderson, and they owned a small paint store at that time in Scorpion. And the paint store was help painters, house painters, and they had a store for a good many years and very well known in the town as just good business owners. And here's another picture where they welcomed, showed us a hospitality in their home. And this is, and there was Farmore. So there's also Hardy, or my then father-in-law's mother, as well as Ruth, her mother, were there too. And you see, Farmore was a very warm, lovely lady. I attended during the 90s her 80th birthday party. And that was a wonderful experience, again, being part of the Danish tradition. And you can see that Farmer was a very warm lady, and she put her arm around my mother. Well, after 1995, this is the time, well, after my parents' visit, that year was coming to a close. Well, most significantly of that year that happened for me was that Prince Joachim and Princess Alexander were married. Now, this is a time that I felt that there was a big point in history. This royal wedding was so exciting. It was so beautiful. It was very cold again in November. I remember standing out there in the snow and the slush, and along with all these people waiting for them to come by. It was just excitement of being out there in the cold. And then there they came with a procession. Seeing them pass by was just such a moment, being part of that moment, the historic moment with everyone. Well, also, I think part of me, there was a little bit of a personal attachment as well. As Princess Alexandra arrived in Copenhagen, she also made some incredible mark to Denmark. She was then called the Chinese princess in the media. There was a far more, since her arrival, interest in Chinese and China or East Asia. And all of a sudden, I felt that it changed Denmark in a way that opened up for the possibility of who could be Danish. When Princess Alexandra picked up Danish rather quickly, and she made such a great impression with the Danish people, I believe, even though I don't have any studies to prove it, I believe that she brought that psychological distance to the Chinese immigrants in Copenhagen just a little closer. That all of a sudden, perhaps, the Chinese immigrants in Denmark could be Danish as well. So I like to share with you my friends, my lifetime friends that I have made in Denmark. And this is Ellen Chan. She was bridesmaid at my second wedding, or my current marriage of over 20 years. And then Marnie Ho is a business owner in Copenhagen, and she is very successful in the IT area. along with her husband. And Cecilia Lai is also still living in Copenhagen, and she worked for the Danish consulate and having had assignments in East Asia for several years. So the future generation since 1995 of Chinese immigrants are not really anymore of the restaurant owners, and they are able to integrate far more into the greater Danish society. So I'd like to end with a quote that I found in Danish and English. It says that the greatest gift of life is friendship, and that I have received it. And this is a very, this is very much echoes the feeling of gratitude that I have for my experience in Copenhagen, and the life that I have experienced there, and the life I have experienced since. With my ability to speak Danish, I'm able to make more Danish friends outside of Copenhagen or Denmark. And even now, sometimes when I do my presentations and I meet someone in the community, and somebody in the crowd would approach me in Danish and would ask me about how I enjoy my life in Denmark. So that to me is a wonderful gift, and that allowed me to give to more people. I will close by saying Mantak. Thank you for allowing me to share my stories about Denmark, and I look forward to learning more stories about the Danish American experience.